Ralph, let us know when you're ready to rock and roll.
Oh, you're live streaming and everybody can hear you.
Well,
you're good.
Gosh, I'm so glad I think.
Something that's a hot mic.
All right, so welcome everyone to our 2021 Board of Education retreat. So pleased to have our board members, superintendent, senior district leadership, council friends joining us. Today, our agenda includes our superintendent evaluation for this first year, an update on our strategic plan that has been put together, and approval of our goals for the next academic year. Very exciting. So I'm going to get us started. Again, we do have a quorum here, and our main board members will filter in. And so, without further ado, who's going to welcome introductions?
Well, you have to sort of.
All right. I will call it us to order. So we're very well rehearsed, right? So just in terms of introductions, if you don't know me, my name is Colin Hostin. I'm the current chair of the board. We have Vice Chair Diana Carpenter next to me. We have previous chair Sarah Lemieux, also previous chair Mike Barbas, and
Vice Chair and Secretary.
Secretary Heidi Keats. And Nancy Chapman. We have our superintendent, Dr. Alexandra Estrella. We have consultant, Dr. John Ramos. We've got everybody. We all know each other. And I want us to get started. It's already 4:44. So we're going to start with a review of the goals and expectations that we set for the academic year 2020 to 2021. Dr. Estrella came on last summer in the middle of what we can call a disruptive time in education. And it's been quite a year. I think it's really worth it at this time to take a moment to reflect, look back on some of the goals and expectations we set last summer. Then we will go into executive session to review as a board the superintendent's performance against those goals this past year. So Dr. Strait, do you want to help us review those goals?
Thank you. So we created a pamphlet for all the board members with the information of the, originally there were 5 goals which were extended to 6 given the nature of the entry process that I encountered when I originally created a entry plan. I didn't know that we were going to be in the midst of the pandemic, and as a result of that, we had to add goals that spoke about a safe reopening. So that's why we have the additional 6th goal within the superintendent's goal. The first goal, if you turn to page 4 of the document, was focused around a smooth transition of leadership and making sure that through the process, I was well informed and aware of the needs of the district as well as the successes that had happened in order to ensure that the achievement of students continued in a seamless way. In goal 2, it was focused around developing a strong collaboration between the board and the superintendent and the cabinet in terms of setting clear governance structures and expectations around the role of the board as well as the role of the superintendent in ensuring effective processes within the district at large. The third goal was focused on looking at the organizational structure, norms, strengths, as well as areas of further development by engaging different stakeholders in the community, building my awareness of where the district was at and the work that needed to be done to continue to elevate the work that happened in the previous strategic plan and further develop a new strategic plan that will help us propel the district forward. The fourth goal was focused on developing communication streamlined within central office of the schools and different partnerships, but also looking at our legislative officials and looking at ways in which we could more effectively collaborate with one another to support the needs of our students. The fifth goal was looking at how to maximize the services and supports within our schools and looking at the current evaluation of the organizational efficacy of the district at large and utilize a lot of the studies that were conducted throughout the year to develop a new. And finally, the sixth goal that we designed was focused around making sure that staff and students had a safe re-entry into the school system in the midst of the pandemic. And setting processes in place in collaboration with our union leaders, our community members, and different stakeholders, most importantly, our parents and students, to ensure that we set protocols that will ensure a safe return to school, but most importantly, that learning would continue despite the modality of learning that students elected to engage in. So if you turn to page 5 and 6, the first component is focused on the goal number 1, which is really tailored around having a smooth transition and focusing on particular elements that are targeted around engaging in a deep communication and listening of the needs of the community. I had created in my original entry plan a checklist of expectations for myself as well as the district at large in terms of who were the different stakeholders that we needed to engage and listen to learn more about the needs of the district. And if you look at page 6, those different constituents are listed, the types of conversations and engagements that I was anticipating engaging with the community and all of those that were met. The one of those elements within the parents and community component that we still have work to do is in having what I call legislative breakfast, where we bring our legislative officials together to have conversations around where we are as a city, what are some of the hopes and aspirations that we have for our children and families, and how do we come together to engage in those conversations. Although there were many conversations with legislative officials at a one-to-one basis and in smaller groups, that component of the work wasn't possible because of the pandemic. So it's something that we're hoping to fulfill in the upcoming academic school year now that we are vaccinated and having bigger group conversations are more feasible. The other component that I'm hoping to further develop from this entry key stakeholder group is creating a teacher advisory group. Although I had the opportunity to engage in listening and learning conversations with educators throughout the district, we haven't yet formed an advisory group because there were so many other elements that were not anticipated when the first entry plan was developed, because a lot of the nuances with COVID kept infusing other pieces that we needed to develop, and we were learning as we were embedding certain components. That's one element that I'm hoping we can further develop this academic school year. Continuing in that thread, we also talked about school personnel beyond just the teacher, and also including paraeducators, our secretaries, nursing staff, lunch personnel, and safety personnel. And although I had opportunities to engage at a one-to-one basis with many of these stakeholder groups, we never had an opportunity to engage them as a collective unit, which is one of the things that I'm hoping to do. We did some of that with the paraeducators, but not in great depth with secretaries, nurses, and lunch personnel and safety personnel. So in the upcoming year, we're hoping to do that. And we deferred creating a staff and safety advisory group for the 21-22 school year, because we were mainly focused on the reopening task force this year, because of all of the components we needed to have in place to have a safe entry to the school year. And then I listed for the board some of the constituents throughout the community that I had an opportunity to engage, or I worked with the different consultants that were helping us strategize and prioritize the needs through the strategic plan, who we engaged and what roles they play within our community. Now, student achievement was actually quite a challenge this year. We had a lot of students that experienced learning loss in different ways. Prior to my arrival, the district transitioned students into home-based instruction. In some cases, the younger grades were immersed into packets of information that they were working on. And in many cases, although the district moved quickly to ensure that students had opportunities for learning, they were not always the most ideal situations. So we really focused on a return to school opportunity, primarily in the elementary school grades, to have all students in person, and hybrid opportunities for our older students, because we understood the challenge of younger students being attentive or engaged in a remote environment. And we were pretty successful in having all of our elementary school students, as well as our students receiving specialized services, as well as our multilingual learners, full-time in person, if their parents felt comfortable to do so. We also embedded in a lot of work in looking at our instructional model and really building the capacity around that work, primarily in looking at the current structures that were in place and thinking about what were some of the areas that we needed to work on to strengthen our programs, particularly in our K-3 grades, really looking at what structures were in place to develop reading process and strategies for students so that they could transition from learning to read to reading to learn. And one of the things that we found was that we needed to enhance our curriculum and embed structures that exhibited all of the necessary pillars to have an effective reading program. And we are in the process of transitioning into scaffolding in a reading modules that will support students in that process. But through that learning, we also discovered that our students also need teachers to know how to teach reading. So we are looking at letters as a resource, as a 2-year scope of work that will really push the development of our teachers to learn how to effectively teach reading, particularly in that K-3 grade band, because it's going to be really instrumental, especially right now, given the amount of learning loss that many of our students experience, that we have strong practices within our early grades to accelerate learning, and most importantly, to really fulfill some of the standards that students need to meet in order to be able to transition in 3rd grade to learn to read to learn. So you will see in the goals for the upcoming school year how we are scaffolding some of that professional learning, but also building the capacity of the team to utilize and enhance curricula that will further support school-wide, which is one of the overarching tools that we have as a district. We also looked at our programming structure, and you will see as we talk about the work for the upcoming school year, really thinking about how do we strategically program so that we provide the SRBI and intervention structures, but we also have opportunities for enrichment. And we can have opportunities to kind of rethink how we're engaging gifted and talented, because although we've made a lot of strides in how we have incorporated GNT and having more inclusive structure, there's still room to provide more diversified programming in that area. And I think that the other component that I want to emphasize is the work that we've done around social emotional learning and building the capacity of our personnel around knowing how to engage in trauma-informed care and providing training so that over 95% of our schools have personnel that is equipped and able to support students because of the training they received, and also elevating the training for BCBAs throughout the district. And in the tool, you'll see further guidance and information of the work that we have done. Lastly, I will mention the work that we've started with Dr. Fergus, really looking at the disproportionality amongst our different subgroups, really learning what are some of the systematic challenges that have led to some of the patterns and trends that we have, and utilizing now that information to really inform some of the curricular redesign work that we have started this summer to really inform our practices for the upcoming school year. Because it's going to be really important not only to continue to accelerate learning for those students that are in that place, but also to ensure that all students have access to the standards, and that when students need scaffolds, it doesn't mean that we have to lower the expectation. It means that we still have to allow that student access to that standard. The difference is that the way that we engage in that process might be different. And we're looking at universal design for learning as the fundamental tool or structure or theory of practice to support that work district-wide. I'm going to move now to goal number 2 and looking at the governance team. When we started, I had the opportunity to work with the board and talking about the role of the board, the role of the superintendent, what does that look like, and how does a healthy governance team work collectively together to ensure that we strive to move the district forward in its practice. We had a number of board retreats that we came together to further discuss the work, to further inform what we wanted to do as a collective as we continue to engage in the equity study, looking at the review of the prior strategic plan, looking at the facilities review, looking at the HR review, and all of these different studies that helped us design the new strategic plan and help us prioritize the things we needed to do. We had opportunities as a collective to always come together and talk about those different studies and talk about how to prioritize the work for the greater good of the district. And then in goals 3 and 4, in terms of engagement and communication, during that initial retreat, we had the opportunity to talk about communication protocols and how the board and the superintendents should engage in communication. And through that process, we created opportunities on a bi-weekly basis for us to have one-on-one conversations around either the workshops or the business meeting or any element of the work within the district that was happening in the moment. And I have to say that I've had some great conversations with the team about the work, and we have been able to really develop a really strong working relationship as a result of those conversations. And we really taken the opportunity. Sometimes I speak with some of you at 7 in the morning or really late at night. But I think those are really important moments in time where we come together to really problem solve, strategize around different elements of interest or concerns to really focus our work in the right direction so that when we're coming together and making decisions, you as a board are well informed of the work, but most importantly, we can make productive and strong decisions for the district because you're well informed of those practices. We also embedded the weekly board report, which I sent to you earlier today, for you to be aware of what's happening within the different departments and giving you an opportunity to maintain, be updated in terms of the work that's happening within the district at large on a weekly basis. We also transitioned Maura to a full-time board executive assistant. I'm trying to find the right word. Because not only is she fulfilling the needs and demands of the board, but also helping with streamlining communication. And we are we created a communication streamline where any parent concern is directed first to her, and she tries to work with the different constituents involved to really problem solve and troubleshoot any of their needs. And if there's no resolution, then obviously it comes to me. We still have work to do in that area because sometimes things come directly to the superintendent's office, and that ladder of referral doesn't necessarily always happen. One of the things that we are working on for 21-22 is really further developing the ladder of referral within the different departments, especially now that we are under a different organizational structure. And we will be releasing that at some point between September and October, where we'll have descriptions of everyone's role within the district at large, and then also having almost like an organizational chart just showing the processes or steps that someone can take to acquire support within the different departments, either internally or externally. I've also had an emphasis in making sure that I engage different legislative officials and community constituents so that we're actively working together. If you turn to page 18, for instance. So I've had, I have monthly meetings with the mayor. I try to set up bi-monthly meetings with board members where we can have deeper conversations about the work. I also try to engage our common council and I try to meet with them and have conversations about what we're trying to do and how we're trying to move the work forward. And that also includes members of the BET as well. So to me, it's really important to actively engage in conversation and communication so that when we have to make decisions, particularly when budget season comes, because it's a very sometimes hot topic and can be, we can have very interesting dialogue around that work. It's really important that we are actively communicating, and we've, even with the land use committee at the city level, we've started to embed times where we meet at least at a quarterly basis so that we have common conversations around some of the big projects that are coming up or are in progress within the district at large. And as we continue to talk about the family center that we're hoping to have at One Park Place, we are really building a system of communication to ensure that we are embedding all constituents within the communication processes, from our students, parents, community stakeholders, as well as our governmental officials, so that we are all in this together and we can collectively work together to make sure that our families have the services that they need to effectively support our children and their development and growth. So I'm going to move now into talking a little bit about building capacity and just building alignment. This year, we spent a significant amount of time engaging in different studies to really assess where our district is and where we want to move the district forward. And as you've been part of many of those conversations, we spoke to many different constituents, starting from the equity study that we conducted to the facilities review to prior to this, the Connecticut Center coming in and meeting with different stakeholders to learn about what was done in the past, what were the successes, and what are some of the things that we needed to continue to embed in the work ahead. And through these processes, we were also looking at what are some of the systemic structures that we need to strengthen and enhance, and how can we do that effectively by embedding these processes within the strategic planning process. So part of the work that we are going to be embarking for 21-22, based on a lot of the findings and learnings that we had from the studies that were conducted, is really starting to redesign and implement new systems or enhancing systems that have existed and fortifying them based on the feedback that we have received. And finally, with Goal 6, a safe return to school, I have to say that we are very proud of the success we had, like I articulated earlier, in making sure that wherever possible, we had as many students in person as we possibly could. And towards the end of the year, as the transmission rate started to dwindle, we started to bring in our ninth graders, and we had a really unique differentiated approach by campus on allowing more and more students to come into the building. But a lot of that was based on building capacity, and the principals were given the autonomy to design those processes towards the end. And then we got a spike again, and we had to place a hold on the additional student return. So we're hoping that for this September reopening, that we can have all of our students in person. We are in the midst of working towards executing a plan of action for your review or in consideration, so that we can have a safe, another safe return to school. And in this case, that we can have all of our students in person for the 21-22 academic school year. So that kind of sums up the document that I provided. There's a lot more detail in terms of the work that I did alongside the team, because this work doesn't happen alone. It took many of your efforts and the efforts of the team that's behind me to make it possible. And I'm really proud of the work they've done. We've worked in many cases 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Joanne Malinowski, who's not here, my contact tracing queen, we were able to keep some schools open the next day because of the intensive work that the team has done. And they have had very many restless nights, and they lost many weekends. So I can say that they are an outstanding team that helps keep us together, and we should be very proud of the work they've done alongside our teachers, our paraeducators, our principals, and the whole personnel together, because our custodians have done a phenomenal work, our school foods personnel have done an outstanding work. I can't speak any more highly of how outstanding they've been this year, despite the challenges that we've been confronted with. So there's a lot to celebrate, but there's still a lot of work to be done. So I'll turn it over now to our chair, and I don't know if you want to transition into executive session.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for collating so much of what happened this year for us in a very easy to read format. I remember, I just want to, a small anecdote. I remember I was on the phone with Dr. Restoria, probably June or late May, facing the end of the semester, and thinking about what we've been through, what we still had to get through in terms of graduations and so on. And I asked her, I said, well, how would you say you did that? Like, how did you manage this? And I remember your response. I've shared it with people, which was that you just didn't have a choice. And I keep that in mind when I think about what we've been able to accomplish this year, because we didn't have a choice. We had to get through delivering education to 12,000 odd students, not that they're odd, about 12,000 students. And I think that in those circumstances, getting through it might have been enough. I think we would have said, wow, we did it. It was not easy, but here we are. We know we still have a lot of work to do. And so I think back to that and then look at what else we were able to accomplish. Your entry plan had to be, really retooled. We added one extra goal, but like every other goal had to be retooled. And to see it here laid out that through it all, we were able to make some real progress on our first year of plans. It's really remarkable. I want to just say that before we get into the deeper evaluation. I will also want to express on behalf of the board my appreciation to Dr. Sharia and the entire team, everybody you just mentioned, because it was a team effort, we couldn't do it alone. And so, I know that we are continuously grateful for the team that we have here in Norwalk. It makes it easier to serve in a role that's not always easy. So yes, I think what we're going to do now is we're going to, as a board, and I want to welcome Erica DePalma, who came in, talk in more detail about evaluating the goals and expectations this year. I think, should we introduce Dr. Ramos before we go into executive session and help frame the discussion for the public, or?
The framing will happen within executive session.
Okay. Well then, if there is a motion to go into executive session.
I motion.
And if it's a second, and if we're all in favor, then I think that's what we'll do.
So we're moving to we set up.
So Colin, what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna stop the live stream now. And then when we come back in the session, I'll start up a new live stream. So that's online, we'll start up. Probably.